Yo, g'day guys, Clevo King here. Got something different for you today. We're going to be installing a brand new IC ignition system. I'm not going to show the whole job, but I'm going to show a few tips and tricks that should help you guys if you come to tackle the same job. First up, let's have a bit of a look at the kit here. We've got our coil. Now the coil comes with bolts to mount the coil to the bracket, but it doesn't come with bolts to put the bracket to the car. So we'll talk more about that later. Always make sure you get the right distributor gear for your camshaft profile. We've got our 7 amp control box here, which I've already mounted onto the bay. We've got our brand new leads here with our numbers and some stickers. They did give us some instructions, which pays to read if you need to, if you're going to go that way. There's a couple of sets of instructions for if you use a booster or not, but this one doesn't use a booster. So that's our diagram here. Show you what I've done so far, guys. We've established that he wants the control box to be mounted here, nice and neat on the firewall. So the trick with that is China graph pencil, mark your centers out, give them a nice big X, center punch your holes and drill them through. Now there are rubber mounted feet that goes underneath there so that this thing doesn't shake around. Make sure you use them, guys, very important. Make sure you don't put this too close to something where you're not going to be able to get your loom on with a neat bend, and you want to be able to access your curve selection here on the end, so you don't want that too close, hard up somewhere where you're not going to be able to get to it. What we're going to do next, double check that that distributor gear suits this engine. We'll loop it up and we'll drop the dizzy in. Now what a lot of people like to do with the 4 dizzies is point number 1 to number 1. I don't like to do that. I like to point number 1 to number 3. So that as the leads come off the cap, they look a lot neater, going 1, 3, 7, 2. So you'll have 3 leads this way, and then you'll have a couple of leads that way. It'll end up looking a lot neater. Another thing is with the dizzy, take your time. If you can't get this tooth in at the right spot, get a 5/16 socket on a 1/4 inch extension, tape it on, like in our oil pump priming video, and just rock the 6-point oil pump drive shaft just the tiniest little bit, so that when you're dropping your dizzy in, that you're getting your dizzy tooth in between the cam and the 6-point oil pump drive shaft at the right point. So that's how you incrementally move a tooth back or forward. The other thing you want to do, this one doesn't have a vacuum control canister on it, of course, but if you do have one, you want to center your vacuum control so you don't run out of room hitting the thermostat housing or the intake. Alright, so we've marked that out, we've drilled it, we've whacked it in place. I've laid my loom out over here. This is really simple. 3-wire setup, big black to the block, which we're probably going to try and connect onto the earth here with the alternator strap. These are the 2 that go to the coil to power it up. Really simple. We'll have our power coming to the coil from the car. So what we've done, this is an XR Falcon 1967. We've deleted the resistor wire out of it. The resistor wire is always going to be this floppy, gummy feeling, generally pink in the older Fords. You'll see if you give it a bend, it's kind of got like an emery. It's pretty crappy. Pull it out. Little tip, if it's got 2 wires on it, the brown wire going to it is to excite the ignition to get the car cranking when you're starting the starter motor. So if you're going to a later model starter motor, like non-clapper style with the solenoid built in, you delete the brown wire. Doesn't matter. If you are using a clapper starter motor, you put the brown wire back on, because the old starter motor had 2 terminals on it, S and I, and now we're just going to be using an S setup. Alrighty, so that's that. We'll get the dizzy, we'll home it in. The reason we're doing the box then the dizzy is so we can see with our leads that are pre-made whether we're going to have to put the coil here or over on the shock tower. We're going to make sure that there's enough length in the coil lead so you've got room to grow. Some of these kits have super short coil leads and it'll cut you out. Yeah, see, that's quite short, so really not going to have very much option with this lead here under the bonnet. It's going to go from the dizzy to the head. So we're going to have to make up a bracket to bolt it to the head. It's not going to reach over to the shock tower. Bit of a misprint on that lead there, that's strange. Nice. Alright guys, so what we've done we've got that mounted. We're about to drop our dizzy in. Now you don't drop your dizzy in without checking your timing down here. I like to put a bit of initial timing in, and I like to start at 10 degrees before top dead center, so it's got a little bit of pre-timing. Now I've dropped the number 1 spark plug, which is up here, guys. First cylinder towards the driver's side of the car in Australia, passenger side if you're watching from the States. I've noticed something. See this plug, how it's got a big R under the NGK and an R in the part number there? No good for ICE or MSD. The R stands for resistor. That means that these plugs were really designed to work with points at a lower 9 volts and to last a long time. They're not going to be ideal. They will work, but they're not going to last long, and you'll have erratic issues. So have a bit of a look, guys. If you've got MSD or ICE and you're having a few tuning issues, yeah, maybe you could have the wrong plugs. Alright guys, so what we're going to do, I'll put this down somewhere safely. I'm going to bump the engine over now and find top dead at compression stroke. So I'm going to stick my thumb in the spark plug hole over here, and I'm going to turn the engine over at the same time. Now I've spun it around a few times now. There's 2 strokes of the engine to 1 cycle of the camshaft. So when you're at top dead center on compression stroke, you will be at 0, but which 0 will you be at? There's 2 zeros. You've got to spin the engine around more than twice so that you can hear the 2 different noises, and you want to go with the louder one. The louder one, when your thumb's in the hole pushing the air out, is going to be the compression stroke, and the quieter one's not going to be the compression stroke, it'll be your exhaust stroke. Alrighty. Alright, so once you know you're on compression stroke, guys, we're going to key the dizzy in. So we're going to look down here at our marks on the harmo, and you want to stop it at 10 or 12 degrees before top. So right there, that's where I like to go from. 12 degrees initial timing. So when we, or 10 there now, spot on. So when we drop our dizzy in and we line our rotor button up with the cap pointing here for number 1 in this direction towards cylinder number 3, we know that we're at compression stroke and it's just about to click around. Now because you're always advancing an ignition system, if you drop your dizzy in at 0 and you line it up dot to dot and you turn the key, it's not going to run. You're going to have to turn your dizzy clockwise to advance it quite a bit and be looking around, which is the last thing you want to do when you're turning on a brand new engine. So I like to start at 10. The racier the engine, the more initial they like. One of mine's running 18 initial, most of them 12 to 16. The more stock, the more you want to wind it back, maybe even to 8 degrees initial. Alright guys, so let's get the dizzy over here. Get this little blocker out of the engine. You don't want any dirt going into the engine. You want to keep everything nice and clean. We'll take this distributor block out. Move that over here somewhere safe. Now you want to have a bit of a look and make sure there's not a big build up of paint in the block there, and it's nice and smooth. That feels great, guys. Alrighty, let's have a look at the dizzy over here now. We've lubed up the dizzy gear. Alrighty, let's get this, let's go and drop it in. So what we're going to do now is have our lead on the dizzy pointing to the back so it's hidden, just for a neater install. We'll drop the dizzy down into the hole like this, get it on the pilot before you lower this in too far to put another little bit of engine assembly lube around here and around here so that that doesn't stick in the block. Once you set this, if your timing's good and you don't have to come back for a while, dizzies have a habit of seizing in Clevo blocks, so I'll put a little bit of lube on there. Alright guys, every now and then when you drop these in, it's not going to play ball. The trick is to pick it up until you just feel that the dizzy gear is disengaged and roll it 1 tooth, drop it back down. Gentle downwards motion until you get the bottom of the dizzy sitting flush on the block, no O-ring showing. This one's not going to go. I've just given it 60 seconds. And so what the trick is now, come over, you grab your 1/4 inch socket set, You get your 5/16 socket out, so this little bad boy here, 2 extensions, electrical tape it on because you don't want none of this falling into the oil pan at this stage of the job. Then you will go in, and if you can imagine a 6-point hex on the bottom and a gear with like 35 teeth on it up the top, there's only going to be 2 or 3 spots where the 6 points of the oil pump drive shaft will align with the cogs of the dizzy gear. So the trick is to come down and to manually turn that oil pump drive shaft just a bee's dick, like 10 degrees one way, 10 degrees the other way. So instead of the dizzy dropping in our 3 spots where we don't want it, but we can move it back more and control that curve so that it's lining up, pointing towards cylinder 3. Hopefully that makes sense. Alright guys, that took a little bit of doing, but look what we had to do there. Bumper to bee's dick, spin this around. Now this is our number 1 here. Number 1 representing number 1 on the cap. We want number 1 pointing back towards cylinder number 3, so our leads are going to come off nice and neat as per the diagram in the box that I just looked at. 1, 3, 7, 2, 6, 5, 4, 8. Alright guys, can't really get it any better than that. 1's 1. Now this is my another little tip here guys. Let's take the cap off. I did mention this in another video. It's pretty basic, it's pretty simple, but it really helps. You get a long pointer like this, screwdriver, something, and you point it in the direction of that rotor button so that you're not guessing and you're not moving the cap and trying to understand, guesstimate where that goes. So you get this and you hold it here in the right direction like that. Get our cap, sit our cap on where it goes. Be mindful of this little lockout notch here guys. Has to go on the one way like that. And then let's have a bit of a look back here now. So the rotor button's pointing perfectly at number 1, which is marked as number 1 on the cap. So that's the way I've always been setting up my dizzies for the last few years. If you come and look over here in this box, we've got shitloads of instructions over here. One of them is actually a distributor lead diagram. So they tell you to have number 1 at the back towards cylinder 3, number 1 marked on the cap, so they come off neat. 1, 3, 7, 2, 6, 5, 4, 8. So there you go guys, that's the diagram right there. It's not just me, and you've got to always remember anti-clockwise, being a Cleveland. So when you've got a distributor that's turning anti-clockwise, to advance it, you turn it clockwise. To retard it, you turn it counterclockwise. Alright guys, let's move on to the next step. That dizzy's gone in. Starting to get some of those good feelings, getting to the tail end of the job guys. Alright guys, so we're smashing this IC install. Yeah, that mounted before. We've clipped our loom in. It says in the instructions, pay particular attention to not letting the distributor 3-wire loom cross with the 2-wire heavy wires that power the coil up. So it's a bit weird that it says that in the instructions, but those wires are pretty much touching out of the box. So I'm going to pull these away a little bit. I've looped that up just for neatness. The coil wires I've run around up onto the guard to pop out of here. There's plenty of room between the control arm. See how that hole for the grease nipples actually was drilled offset? Normally there wouldn't be enough room to come through here guys, so just make sure you've got plenty of clearance, nothing's getting crushed. I'll chuck a zip tie on the inside of that. These 2 wires here are going to go to the coil, positive and negative, which we're going to make an aluminium bracket to mount off of the head because it didn't come with the kit. And the black wire here is going to go onto our block earth strap at the bottom down here, and I've cleaned that with a wire brush. That says on the instructions that's very important, it needs to be done. So we're going to put our battery to block earth strap and our IC ignition earth, which comes off of the coil wires, into the same spot there. It's going to be the best way to have it running. Alright guys, it's coming up a treat. Let's have a bit of a peek. Got our grey and white out the front here, that'll be for a taco feed. This guy doesn't have a taco, so we'll roll them up and hide them too. Alright, let's keep going. Alrighty, so that IC ignition's, the DZ's in, the cap's on. We've had a little bit of an issue with our air filter interfering here just ever so slightly. It's running a comp thumper cam, so it's going to sound sick. Something you've got to remember when you're starting an engine for the first time, you can't really just put a timing light straight on it and start actually tuning the engine. There's only X amount of things that you can adjust, like the carby transfer slots, giving it a little bit of initial timing, controlling your total curve with the map. The timing curve I've chosen here for this particular build is E. Alrighty, this is it guys, I can taste it. Everything's been checked. It's going to be sick.